perpetrated, and the civilians are without any help. As you know, the protection of civilians is the heart of the peacekeeping operation. That should be fulfilled. Right now, the United Nations mission in Côte d'Ivoire could not fulfill this mandate, this task.
Opposition groups in Bahrain say they're ready to talk to the ruling family about political changes in the country. This comes after weeks of protests in the Gulf nation. Another large demonstration took place in the streets of Manama on Thursday. Pro-reformists drove their cars in a mass rally calling for change. In Oman, several thousand pro-government supporters took part in one of the largest rallies staged in the country so far. They gathered outside Sultan Qaboos bin Said's palace in the northeastern town of Mana. Last Sunday, 2 people were killed in a pro-democracy protest in the industrial city of Sohar. Tunisia's interim president has called an election on July the 24th to appoint a group to rewrite the constitution. But that means Fouad Mebaza will stay in power beyond his March the 15th deadline. In a televised speech, he said he and the caretaker government will keep their positions until the vote is held. The military council in Egypt has appointed a new prime minister. Issam Sharaf will take over from Ahmed Shafiq, who resigned on Thursday. Sharaf, a former transport minister, has been asked to form a new government. Shireen Tadros reports from Cairo.
It was the protesters' main demand, and on the eve of another million-man march, it was met. The military announcing on their Facebook page they'd accepted the resignation of Prime Minister Ahmed Shafiq, the man appointed by former President Mubarak before he stepped down. 12 hours before, Shafiq was on Egyptian television having heated debates. He told presenters and guests he wasn't planning on stepping down, even given the public pressure and planned protests. He also defended the state security apparatus Egyptians have come to loathe.
Friday's demonstration, which had been gaining a lot of momentum here, is still going ahead. But organizers say it's not going to be a sit-in or a protest, but a day of celebration because the Egyptian people have had one of their main demands met.
Friday will be a festive day. We will finish in the evening and tell people there is no need for further action now. We need to give a chance to the new cabinet to tell us how and when the rest of our demands will be met.
This is the man tasked with forming a new cabinet, Egypt's new Prime Minister Issam Sharaf. He served briefly as transport minister under Hosni Mubarak but quit his post in protest after a deadly train crash. He said the state was not serious enough about solving traffic issues in Egypt. Youth and opposition groups support his appointment. They want a new government of technocrats and to be rid of any remnants of the old regime. With political changes going full steam ahead, Egyptians are cautiously optimistic. They're keeping a close watch, aware the people's strength lies in their stamina to keep pushing for the kind of Egypt they're still dreaming of. Shireen Tadros, AlJazeera, Cairo.
Susan Glasser is editor-in-chief of Foreign Policy magazine. She's also published the first e-book on the Egyptian revolution titled Revolution in the Arab World, Tunisia, Egypt and the Unmaking of an Era. She joins us now live from Washington, D.C. Thanks a lot for joining us, Ms. Glasser. You've got Tunisia, Egypt, Libya at the moment. Many say is burning. The possibility is also ahead. All sorts of permutations for the likes of Bahrain and Yemen and other Arab countries. What's the common thread?
You know, what a great question. I think, first of all, we have the ebook now because there are chapters still to be written, so we'll have to keep updating clearly. What's the common thread? These are the known unknowns, right? Go back, read the story. What you'll find, of course, is that we heard these signals without really hearing them, without really listening. So what's the narrative now that we see this unfolding? And I think one thing that we see pretty clearly is that there was a real breakdown between certainly what the leaders here in Washington were hearing when it came to a policy thing and what the people on the ground and what the experts were telling them. Yeah,
and your magazine does do that to a great extent. It tries to hold a mirror to the double standards in policy, if you like. I wonder, do you believe that Barack Obama is on the right side of history now, particularly with regards to, for example, Libya, where just a few hours ago he unequivocally said Muammar Gaddafi must step down. It's over, it's finished, he must go.
Well, that's right. I think you're absolutely right. You're tracking the real-time changing of the White House policy here in Washington day by day. Today was another significant day because President Obama made another significant shift. And by the way, what looks to be over the objections of his Pentagon and of cautious voices saying, you know, it's not so simple to contemplate a no-fly zone. That is, in fact, an act of war. His own Secretary of Defense has come out pretty strongly and said that. I think if you go back and read the narrative, even of what's happened in terms of the White House policy toward the Middle East since January, what you see is a record of change day by day, of improvisation, of not necessarily being ahead of the story or even understanding where it was going to go next, but at each step along the way being hornswoggled once again, and the policy changing to reflect that. President Obama has not sent a consistent message of where he stands, and it's really a day-by-day change.
And looking at that broader picture again, Hosni Mubarak was an ally for 31 years, a strategic, vital ally for the United States, no matter what he did, what he had done within his country. Ben Ali was an ally for 23 years as well, maybe not as crucial as Hosni Mubarak. Muammar Gaddafi perhaps tolerated because he played ball over the past decade in what they call his rehabilitation. But again, no matter what he did within his country, do you think that the egg on the administration's face now and on U.S. foreign policy in general will force a rethink as to how it deals with other authoritarian leaders, not only in the Middle East, but in Central Asia or anywhere else in the world, looking ahead in the present and future?
I think that's a great question. This is something, of course, that American policy has struggled with for decades unsuccessfully. Last year, we ran a cover of our magazine dedicated to the bad guys of the world. And at the time, it seemed like a real outlier. That was not what Barack Obama was here to project a new realism into American politics. He wasn't going to go around spreading freedom for freedom's sake like George Bush. So you're hearing something very different in Washington these days. How much is it going to permanently affect policy? Well, look at Central Asia. Look at Uzbekistan, where right after 2001, the United States wanted to station its bases there in order to begin the war in Afghanistan. We had a change of heart briefly after the Andijan massacre and were kicked out of the country. We've been back in and making friends with the very, very heavy-handed ruler of Uzbekistan, Islam Karimov. Is American policy going to change? Are American interests really going to change in the long term? That would be a pretty radical shift. So I don't expect to see Barack Obama going around and undoing a network of American alliances with authoritarian leaders. But I do think it's going to make people think twice here in Washington about some of those relationships.
Susan Glasser, really good to hear your thoughts. Thank you very much for joining us on Al Jazeera.
Thank you for having me.
Now, doctors in the UK have performed a medical miracle on a stillborn baby girl. They brought her back to life by freezing her brain. More on Ella's story shortly. And jewel of the ball, Silvio Berlusconi's dancer